similar to what you did on the $1 million project that we did in 1999. So rather than telescope those on each other, we're trying to say, let's try to get one paid off and then try to do the other. From there it goes to the pump station that pumps into the two trickling filters. The south trickling filter was built in 1970. It's the one with the concrete block wall. It's 40 years old, probably pretty good shape. The block wall probably needs some work over time. But really not a lot of deterioration. The other one, the north, and that's where the flow goes first. So the heavier growth, if you look at it, you look at the organisms growing on that, they're much thicker, they're much more brown in color, not kind of that gray color that you see in the second one, and that's just because of the kind of organisms. It's eating the really heavy pollutants, and so it's got kind of that rich growth on it. It looks good. It's doing a good job. And we pump that around just so you know. Hey, I got more analogies than that if you want.
You're talking to a guy that knows how to spread it too.
Well, I can spread it without ever saying much about it. So this is all my analogy. Then we go to the second one, which is the north one, and that's the original trickling filter, 1930s era. If you look at below ground, because as a part of this, we had Jack in there and dig the plastic media out down about 3 feet. And when you look down there, the concrete actually is in surprisingly good condition given the age of the facility. Doesn't appear to show any signs of starting to deteriorate down below the water level, down below kind of the media level. So we think you can limp another 20 years out of that from what we've seen. But what you are seeing is that on above ground, there is some problems developing. Sort of right at the top of the structure, particularly where they cut a door in and a couple of other places, you're starting to see some real advanced deterioration, some delamination, and some spalling. And if you really want to get another 20 years out of a trickling filter, there's some work that you need to do to be able to repair the 3 or 4 places in that kind of upper part of it, sort of from the water level, from the media level up to that, what was the top of the clarifier before. You can imagine that sort of vertical wall coming off. We think that's something that needs to be done fairly soon. Not real expensive, but there's just a handful of places that need to be worked on. If you don't, that deterioration will continue to accelerate, and at some point then it's going to be not cost effective to fix it. The third, while we're in that trickling filter, that was poured, and that was built, it was poured a poured-in-place wall, and it was a windscreen. It didn't have a cover on it. It was just designed to let the wind blow across the figure. We put the wall up about 7 or 8 feet, and you don't get as much cold blowing in it, that the heat sort of conserved in it. Well, that wall is beginning to deteriorate. It's got some deterioration, particularly on the longitudinal, kind of the cold joint around it. But overall, it's probably got another 5 years or 7 years before it's going to get off the ghost. So in looking at it, you've got 2 approaches, and we may play with this before the final report. One is, if you wanted to stage it, you could do kind of a critical repairs now, replace the wall in a few years, or you could sort of do it all at once. We're kind of looking for some feedback, from the council and staff before we decided on that. But we could divide that into 2 different stages. But sometime in the next few years, we're going to have to do something on that trickling filter, or we're not going to be able to save it for another 20 years. And that would be a shame, because to replace it would be very costly and perfectly good unit. Really do a good job from a quality perspective. Once we get done with there, then it comes out of the trickling filters and it goes over to what they call a splitter box, which just divides the flow between these 2 circular final clarifiers. It's in really good condition, except they missed one, we think is sort of an essential part of it. There's no way to close off the filters. Normally when you do a splitter box, you always want to put an isolation gate in. So you can close one off and run it through the other one, take one out for maintenance or whatever. Right now, there's no way to do that. It's got to go to both of them. And so we think that isolation gates can be put in there. You can put down closer valves and slide gates in there to close it off. They designed the structure so you can replicate those gates in there without too much difficulty. What that does is, one, from a maintenance perspective, it allows you to take one out of service if you need to. The other is that one of the concerns that Jeff and operating staff have is that in the winter, they ice up. And one of the reasons they ice is that it's just the water sitting there too hot, it's too cold. One of the solutions, first thing you do when you get a lot of icing problem in the clarifier, you cut down the number of clarifiers. So in other words, you're moving the water, it's not there as long, you move the water through there more quickly. So the isolation valve would allow you to close off and only run one kind of clarifier current over the periods, which will help cut down the icing problem. So that's a pretty cheap, we think that from a maintenance perspective as well as an operation perspective, fairly short term that those isolation valves should be put in. There was some discussion about putting covers on the final clarifiers. You can do that, but one of the problems with that is that final clarifiers, look at it, they have here where the water comes up and then just kind of look over the notches. You notice you get a lot of growth of algae and things on those little notches and weirs and then the little trough. And so you want to be able to clean those out, close those down and knock that stuff off. But when it's inside, under a cover, that becomes a real problem, which you don't have access to. It's not like the trickling filter where you just never go in it. The clarifier, you really need to be able to access it so that you can maintain it. So we think, short of the last resort, normally we don't recommend covers in final clarifiers just because it's more difficult to monitor them. You tend not to clean them, and that creates some other problems. So if the isolation valves by themselves don't cut down your icing problem, the next step is that you could put heat, radiant heat, to heat what's referred to as the scum beach. I'm joking. This is not like a recreational beach, but if you look at it, there's an arm that scoops around the top of it. It's designed to pick up floating things. There's like a little metal trough where it brings it up and dumps it into the box. And that little metal thing is referred to as the scum beach. And that's the thing that most of the time is the first thing that freezes up in the winter. And that's what causes the problem. And you can heat the scum beach in really cold weather to keep it from icing as badly. So we think that trying to run one in the winter is the first step. Then if you have to, look at heating the scum beach. Generally is the last resort of which you should consider covering them. Most communities don't find it necessary to cover them. That cutting down the number of clarifiers, in a few cases, heating the scum beaches is enough to keep the icing problem under control. So those are kind of the recommendation there. Not a lot on the clarifier. The other part of the treatment plan is that although we're going to meet the standards for DOD and suspended solids and ammonia nitrogen, the use assessment and attainability study is classifying the creek as secondary body contact, which means that we're going to have to disinfect or basically kill the fecal coliform bacteria before we discharge it into the stream. There are two ways to do that. One is you can do it with chlorination, similar to what oftentimes historically be done in the water plant. The other is that you can use ultraviolet disinfection, which is just light. If you've got high quality effluent, you can use UV light and kill the bacteria. Historically, chlorination has been the more popular because that has been available as the technology has been around for decades. Starting about 25 years ago, the UV disinfection started to come onto the market. We're now in the 8th and 9th generation of UV product here. But probably almost every treatment plant now that goes to disinfection is looking at UV because it avoids the chemical handling costs. You don't have to deal with the chemicals. You don't also then, if they change the stream standards down the road, if you put chlorine in, they're also going to establish a residual chlorine. So sometimes I not only have to put chlorine in, but I have to put in another chemical to take the chlorine back out so I don't adversely impact the stream with too high of chlorine. Don't have to worry about that with UV.